more than $50,000, they go to a fiscal committee. Fiscal meaning money.
I'm a vice chair of the Appropriations Committee in the House. The interesting part about being in appropriations is that you see all the bills from every single policy committee. There's lots of policy committees, and there's only one appropriations committee. So we see probably, anywhere from 2 to 5 to 10 bills from each of those policy committees. So it can really add up.
In terms of fiscal committees, the House and the Senate differ on how they operate. There are 2 fiscal committees in the House and only 1 in the Senate. Technically, transportation also deals with money, but that's for another video.
What are we talking about? In the Senate, the Ways and Means Committee cover taxation and spending in one committee structure. Well, the ways basically are taxes. The means are basically spending. In the House, appropriations deals with spending, finance with taxation.
In the policy committee, legislators discuss what the state wants to do. In these fiscal committees, legislators discuss how much an idea will cost. These costs are broken down into what are called fiscal notes.
So fiscal notes kind of look at all the different agencies that are going to be implementing the legislation, the policy. So that's what a fiscal note does. It kind of tells us a little bit about how much it's going to cost so we can determine whether or not we can afford it.
When you're talking about new proposals, fiscal notes are speculative. They are best guesses of things. How many people will it take to run this program? How much will each of these positions cost? How many hours per year will it require to run this program? If we're using existing staff, what type of allocation of time will it require? And there is a fairly complex math system that the Office of Financial Management and the Fiscal Note Office uses into generating these estimates. And they have to do thousands of them in a 105-day session. So they are estimates, and they are the best estimates that are available. In cases where we're expanding existing programs, the math will be far more certain because they actually have real data to work with. But with new proposals, it will be speculative. It'll be best guesses.
Like policy committees, fiscal committees also have public hearings. So, how might your testimony differ from committee to committee?
The fact is, when you go to a fiscal committee, you have to say why this spending is important. Why this spending is important to keep or to get rid of. But what you need to do is tell the member in usually a minute, "Hi, my name is Mike Moran. I'm here to speak on House Bill 1234. Protecting three-toed sloths is a surprisingly important issue in the Olympic Peninsula, and the $4 million that we're asking for will keep these animals, these precious sacred animals, in the Olympic forest with the vampires and everything else that goes on up there in Twilight Land, and you must help us." I mean, that's how you take the financial message and you tie it to the policy concern.
You're supposed to talk about the cost of the bill and why you want to pay for this bill with taxpayers' dollars and why it's important. But oftentimes it's really hard for people to understand actually what it is we're talking about and why we want to pay for it. And so a lot of testimony does sort of loop back into the policy in itself, kind of going back, having a day in school where you're learning about voting. They'll typically talk about how important that is, but also that the cost that it takes and the people's time it takes is worth it.
Every industry has its acronyms and jargon that confuse anyone on the outside. The Washington State Legislature is no exception. One of the most confusing acronyms you'll hear is NTIB. NTIB, what does it mean? You may be thinking, not that interesting, but I'll tell you anyway. In the legislative world, NTIB stands for Necessary to Implement the Budget. But that definition alone doesn't really help. So let's break it down. The legislative session runs on a series of self-imposed cutoff dates. Policy committee cutoff, fiscal committee cutoff, House of Origin floor cutoff, all leading up to sine die, which is the last day of session.
Sine die.
The legislature is adjourned.
Bills that don't make it past these deadlines are considered dead. But not NTIB bills. They can be resurrected at any time because those bills are necessary to implement the budget. Now, you might be wondering, aren't all bills that cost money part of the budget? Well, yes, but it's more nuanced than that. To unpack this legislative lingo, we turn to former Office of Financial Management Director Victor Moore. OFM, another fun acronym, is the agency that oversees the allotment and distribution of money to executive agencies based on what the legislature passes and the governor signs.
Bills typically have a cutoff date, and if they don't reach certain thresholds, like they don't pass out of committee or they don't get off the floor by a certain time, then they are dead. However, there are provisions made for budgets, what they call necessary to implement the budget. And that is, there may be provisions in the budget, appropriations made that require legislation in order to enact them. So those bills are not subject to the cutoff, and they can be considered right up until the deadline. So they say sometimes a bill is never really dead till it's dead. Those bills that are necessary to implement the budget have a much longer lifespan than those that aren't going to be in the budget.
So, NTIB bills generally do one of three things: create new revenue, like taxes, create savings, like tax cuts, or create financial obligations that must be funded in the budget. That might make it sound like almost any bill affecting money could qualify, but bills are not automatically declared NTIB. Legislative leadership, typically the Speaker of the House or the Senate Majority Leader, must designate them as so. If they do, the bill can, 1, be heard after cutoff dates, and 2, be included in budget negotiations, even if it hasn't passed yet. So why use NTIB at all? Because the budget funds policy. It doesn't create it.
Necessary to implement the budget means, for instance, that money is given to an agency to perform a certain activity, which hasn't been authorized in law yet.
We give a round of applause for all these local leaders and elected officials who work so hard on behalf of the people of the state. And give Tammy a big round of applause for her leadership with Visit Seattle. So before I have a few remarks, and we're going to sign a bill into law that will have a real positive impact for the people of the state, I did set 3 goals for myself this year, by the way. The first was have the Seahawks win the Super Bowl. That was number 1. Number 2 was bring back the Sonics. We made some progress on that yesterday for sure. And number 3, get the Mariners back to the World Series for the first time. So we're on a good path for all 3 of those goals. Look, I want to thank all of you for the work that all of you do to promote Washington and bring tourism to our beautiful state. I'm excited to do something that is typically done in Olympia, but we're doing here, and that is to actually sign a piece of legislation into law. You know, once in a while we do that bill signing out in public, and this seemed like the perfect opportunity. So just a little bit of background. In 2020, the legislature restarted the state's role in tourism marketing by creating the Washington Tourism Marketing Authority. But as you might imagine, funding for marketing has been difficult to come by with some budget challenges that we're experiencing. So many folks in this room, and certainly behind me, have worked hard on this issue. I know the Port of Seattle and State of Washington Tourism and others, many others, testified in support of the bill that I'm about to sign into law. In fact, in his testimony, State of Washington Tourism CEO Dave Blanford, who's here today, he said, quote, "This bill is an opportunity to create a robust, sustainable, fair, responsible state tourism program after many years. We heard you and we got it done." House Bill 2325 will allow the Tourism Marketing Authority to generate upwards of $25 million annually to fund its marketing work. And you all know why that funding is so important. It's because we want to showcase our beautiful, incredible state and bolster economies all across Washington state. And I want to be clear, this effort is not about any one event, even one as incredible as the World Cup. It's really about creating sustainable funding source that benefits tourism marketing all across Washington state. Tourism officials from both sides of the Cascades will be supported by this legislation. And we heard from folks on both sides of the state what folks in this room already know, that this investment will help communities coordinate their efforts to attract visitors and support local businesses in rural and urban areas. In fact, rural areas in particular don't have the resources always to promote their areas on their own without the state level support. I also want to emphasize that this bill received overwhelming bipartisan support, and I'm just deeply appreciative of legislators on both sides of the aisle who got this done. So now I have the pleasure of signing this legislation into law, and I want to highlight, of course, the team effort. We so appreciate many of you in the room who wrote emails, who reached out to legislators, who testified like Dave did in committees. Every legislator, and there are many here, know that to get a bill like this across the finish line in a short session, only 60 days, a lot of competing priorities, it takes folks like you reaching out and doing that really hard work. So thanks to all of you. But we also, of course, really appreciate the sponsors of the legislation. The prime sponsor of this legislation is State Representative Dave Paul. He's here, and State Senator Marcus Rottelli, the companion sponsor. Give them a huge round of applause for their leadership. Marcus would be here, but he's in California watching his daughter play in a softball tournament, or in a soccer. I'm the softball dad. He's the soccer dad in a soccer tournament in California. I'm going to use. That's right. I'm going to use 3 pens to sign this. When we sign the bill, we typically give the pen to the prime sponsor. So, of course, I'll be doing that today. Another round of applause, of course, to State Representative Dave Paul for his leadership. Yeah, thank you. But I'm going to use 2 more because I think Dave deserves credit for his leadership. Give him a round of applause. For you, sir. Take your pen. Yep, awesome. Thanks so much. And, of course, for Tammy for her leadership. Give her a huge round of applause. Where are you, Tammy? Thank you so much. We'll get the pen, too. And with that, we've now signed this legislation into law. Give everybody a big round of applause, everybody. Yeah, awesome. Thanks, everybody. Go Sonics. Great to see you all. Hey, thanks so much. Really appreciate it. Did you have a mirror? Okay.
Microphone while they make their way off. Thank you, Governor, for making the time to join us today and to share this important moment with us. As we move on with our program, this is a great opportunity to talk about where we go from here. We're going to dive into that a little bit more.